Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today are the top 10 items needed for a smooth closing. And this kind of starts with a listing. So when you're out going for your listing appointment, keep these in the back of your mind. What I like to suggest is if you have a folder that you put all of your information in, you can even put, Cindy made a checklist here of the items I'm going to cover. So you can have those in your file to go over. So the first item that we have is to make sure that you have the fully executed contract. And what I mean by that is to make sure all your initials down at the bottom are all signed. Make sure the buyer has signed, the seller has signed, everything is completely filled out. Because what happens when you deliver the contract to the title company, the processor scans over, goes through, and pulls out the pertinent information. If it's not fully initialed, if there's not a signature, something's missing, it's got to go back to you guys. You got to take it back to your client. So there's another day or two that's lost into the process, or tracking people down, taking time away from what you're doing. So it's good to be proactive and just check through the contract, make sure that it is fully executed with all those initials. Yeah.
Is it the listing agent that brings it to the title company?
Sometimes you've got the other side, the buyer's agent may bring it too. So it depends on how you all have worked it out, or what the listing agent or the buying agent may, because they could bring it with the escrow check. But also, just to make sure that, because you get to review it too, just to make sure, especially with it floating around via email, that you can check that out. Right, and then you can have, through dot loop or whatever, you can have that signature, but make sure that it's there. Sometimes they may come across and it's not there, or you may miss a page with add an initial, something like that. But from the title standpoint, we need all of those things completed to make it a valid contract for us to be able to go ahead. And especially the lender too. Sometimes the lender may catch it if you do have a loan involved, and then they'll kick it back. So these are things that on the front end, you all as realtors can be proactive on, that helps again for it to be a smooth closing. Okay, the next one is a prior owner's policy. So this is with, if you are the listing, you have the listing here. Per the contract, you also have to see if the seller does have a prior owner's policy. And the prior owner's policy can help in two ways. Besides fulfilling the contract and presenting it. One, if it falls in the parameters of 3 years or less, the effective date, the seller can get what they call reissue credit. If it falls outside of that, it still helps with the title search. And let's say there's also an encroachment or something that may pop up on our search, we can go back to the prior owner's policy, see if it's included on that, which can help with a smooth transition in there. So the owner's policy can help in a lot of ways to keep everything going smooth and to help out, and also to save your seller some money. So that's something, and if you do have you're going on your listing appointment, that's one of the items you could say, do you all have an owner's policy? A lot of times, oh yeah, it's in the box somewhere. So it'll give them a chance during the selling process to be able to find it, so they're not scrambling at a last minute to be able to locate it. So that's one of the things with the owner's policy. Okay, and also prior survey. Again, in accordance with the contract, if the seller has a survey, they need to present it. Now, if the survey has had changes made to it, we will need to get a new survey from the buyer. The buyer will have to get a new survey. If the footprint of the seller's current survey is still the same, then it can be used. But I would also recommend just to get a hold of the survey, because it can help with questions, things that are coming up currently. And also you could sometimes go back to the same surveyor if there's questions, because they don't have it there, and sometimes they can give you a reduced rate. It depends on your relationship and things with the surveyor. But so that would be a good one to get also up front that they can check through. And on a listing, you may want to have a survey. A potential buyer may want to look at the survey. So you've got it all right there in your little packet that you can say, yes, here's the survey, to be able to present.
Barbi, you want to tell them a few things that might have changed on the footprint?
Oh, sure. Okay, a pool. Yay! They could have added a pool. That could have changed it. You have your porch, and in addition to the porch could be added on there, second story, in addition to the house, redoing the driveway, things like that that might encroach. Putting up a fence, that's a biggie too, because the fence may not go exactly on the same property line. It may be over a little bit, either side. So things that change that could encroach onto something. A big thing is to check if they did put in a pool where the pool deck is. A lot of the properties have maybe a 5-foot easement in the back, utility easement. Make sure that pool deck is not into the easement. Then we would have to get an exception or something for that.
How about the age of the survey? Does that matter?
It's become a little more flexible now. It used to be 10 years or less, but depending on how old, has it been the same owner, has the owner changed, things like that. So no matter what, give us the survey, then we can make the determination from there. And sometimes we may have to just go to underwriting and say, okay, will this be okay? A lot of times if it's a flat book page, simple legal, it can go a little older. But just bring it to us and then let us make the determination on that. If the seller doesn't have it in the footprint, then it does, the buyer ends up paying for that, unless it's some negotiated cost, then it's usually the buyer. Okay, the next one, payoff information and seller's social security numbers. This is another item that you can get for when you're on a listing appointment. It is important, we need to get the payoff information, because of course we have to get a payoff, the amount. So if we have all of this information up front, when we set up our files, we have it, we don't have to contact you or go back to the seller for that information. A good thing you can get is just ask for the seller a copy of their statement, their mortgage payment, the statement on there, because it's got the account number, it's got the phone number, and then you can just write the social on there. Now again, because of private information, you may want to hand that to us as opposed to emailing it to us unless it's done securely. But that is one thing that is important to have. If the seller does not want to give you the social, then just say they will be getting a phone call from us, because that's one of the things for us to get payoff information. We do need the seller's social security numbers, because either we have to give it to the person that gives us the payoff, or we plug it in on the phone on one of those automatic rotor things. So that is important. Again, it's something that we get up front, so we don't have to contact you or bother the seller for, and you can get that at a listing appointment or when you get the listing. Hey, y'all want to be paid? Yes! So, up front, when you deliver the contract or in the beginning, let us know what your commission is. Also, depending on if you all have the DA, disbursement authorization, whatever you guys may use, let us know up front, okay? This will be given to you at a certain time. Sometimes it's a couple days before closing. We try not to get it the day of closing, because the CD has been prepared, everything's all on there. And granted, it is a seller's side, but we still have to send it back through if there are any changes on the CD. So that is important, and it's good for us to know, because whatever we as a title agent can put on that CD or into the file early, again, it makes it easier. The lender gets to see it early, so it's not as complicated as run at the last minute when we're trying to put everything together. So that is an important thing. And like I say, you all want to get paid and get your check. So just make sure. And I wish there was a way that we'd go back and on the contracts they could put, your place for your commission. But in an email or some kind of a form to let us know what that is, and then about your DA if you all do have that. And that's why it's important to get it to us ahead of closing, if at all possible, so we can give you that check, or you don't have to wait for that check. Because sometimes if the DA arrives with the agent and everything is all done, we have to wait and go back and recut some of the checks. So again, that's another thing to keep it smooth, and for you guys too, so you can get it right there instead of having to wait a little bit longer. Okay, buyer-seller information, depending again which side, the more information we can get, the contact information. We do have buyer and seller information forms. There's some things that we need to find out from them. And then also just for contacting during the process, especially if it is the buyer, to deal with the lender, things like that. So what you can get, phone numbers, email addresses, mailing addresses, because for documents, we have to put in the seller's new address. We have to put in the buyers. Are the buyers going to live in the property? Do they have another address? This information, again, if you can find that out and help us out on that, we can get everything done sooner and smoother. Okay. The license number for the agents, and I'm using us as an example, we have a database. So the first time you guys use us, if you haven't used us, we would need your license. Then it gets put into the database, and then you don't have to worry. But on the CDs, on the back page, there's a section in there that they need the broker's license and the realtor's license. And so that's why we do need it. And it makes it easier for you guys just to give it to us up front. And then, like I say, once it's in there, it's in our database, and unless something changes, you're good to go. The same thing for you guys, your contact. If you're new coming in, we'll need all the contact. But again, once it's in the database, we put it in there, then it will populate up. But in the beginning, we want to be able to contact you both by email and cell phone, depending on how you like to be communicated. Sometimes we just do it both ways to make sure, so we can get you for that. Okay, this is a biggie. If you're selling a condo or a property that's in a homeowners association, there are so many different homeowners associations out there, and they seem to change. So we have like a list of the various homeowners associations, but somehow they can be sold, changed. So when you get your listing, find out who the homeowners association is. There's also some out there that have two homeowners associations. You've got A and you've got B. So we have to contact both of them, because there may be fees that are paid by both. So that's, there's a master and then another association. So if you can get that information, but it's also good because if a buyer's coming up, you're working with a buyer, you need to know, okay, there are these associations, these are what the fees are, and if there's any delinquent fees. But the most important thing is to get us the information, the contact and the phone number, and then we can go from there to get the estoppel information for the closing. And that was one of the things they were supposed to be getting away from, or rush fees and things like that, because they get you over a barrel. Because if it takes 2 weeks, you've got to order it with 2 weeks before the closing, and so then it turns out to be a rush, and so that's why this ruling. But I'll go back, because I know I've got it somewhere in my archive, so I'll get your business card, and then I can send that to you. But estoppels, that is just, what can we say? And even if the title industry too had been pushing and lobbying to get that, because a lot of times we would have to come out of pocket. You pay it up front, but we have to collect it on the settlement statement. So then we have to go back, and if the contract falls through and we've already paid for it, then we have to go back and try to collect it. You know, we have a form that they sign, but just still, it's just.
What we do is, if we're representing the buyers, as far as getting the homeowners association, let's say it's not in the MLS, can we reach out to, let's say that the listing agent has the title company listed on the MLS form, can we reach out to you and say, there's no homeowners information on the MLS, do you have this homeowners association information?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we don't, then we'll, so that's part of the thing with trying to get people to give that to us up front. And then sometimes on the addendum to the contract and with the homeowners, sometimes it's written in there.
Okay.
You know, it's, let's just say $300 a month.
Oh, that's.
So then, depending on when the closing is, and depending on if the seller has paid it, then you either credit the seller, credit the buyer, and then some are paid quarterly. But whatever the situation is, we would prorate it based on the closing. Okay. Copy of trust, corporate, or LLC. My kids went to a school, LCC, so that's why I always kept saying that backwards. Okay, the LLC documents. Okay, if you are listing a home and the owner is in the name of a trust, if the owner is a corporation or an LLC, we need to see those documents to make sure the name is correct, that they have the powers and authority, like for an LLC, for example, the managing member. Can one member sign? Is it 2 or 3? These documents will explain who and how they can sign. Same thing with the trust, to make sure that we have the correct full trust name, because you may, and sometimes on a contract, it's just, you know, Jane Doe trustee. Okay, Jane Doe trustee of what trust? And is it dated? Are there any amendments? Things like that. So if these are not brought to us in the beginning, we will be contacting you to find out. The same thing with corporations. You know, is there a partnership that is you know, with the corporation? Is there a trust? You know, how is everything all set up so we can know how to do our documents and to make sure everything is done correctly. And if we have that up front, and then any questions that we have, we can get that all resolved again instead of later on, because being proactive and getting everything done in the beginning makes for the smooth transaction. And at any time you guys have any questions, like you're going on a listing appointment and you find out it's in the name of the trust, you know, give us a call. I mean, it's a partnership. We're working together with everybody. We try to make your job easier. You're making ours. I mean, it is a partnership with this. And so at any time, please reach out to us and with any questions you may have. Information that closing is not a mail away either on both sides. This is huge. Because what happens is 2 days before closing, oh, they're out of town. Okay, we're scrambling. Mr. Lender, we need this package or this or that. So, and it's amazing too how many people, when you have your closing date, oh, that's my cruise, or this or that. So people just don't have the sense of urgency to be here. I think with our technical capabilities now, we can contact people, you know, over in Europe and around. But we need to know that up front because, number one, the lender, there's certain parameters that have to happen for a mail away if you're representing the buyer. For a mail away, they have to sign, some lenders, you have to sign the document on the day of closing. You can't predate. So therefore, we have to be able to get that, you know, to the buyer for that time. For the seller, for the warranty deeds. If it's a mail away to the seller, we can get them to sign the deed ahead of time, and then a power of attorney for the rest of the documents. It just makes everything smoother, so there's no skips or rushes at the end. Unless something unforeseen happens and comes up at the last minute, most people do know if in a month if they're going to be available for the closing. Now, for your seller, this is a second home and the seller is out of town, you should know, okay, unless they're going to plan on coming down, it will be a mail away up to them. And then we can work it out because as a seller, they do need documents notarized. There are mobile notary services that we can connect, but again, we just need some time to get that scheduled or to let the seller know, you may have maybe had a notary at their work, but it just makes it smooth, seamless transition for them to be able to get all the documents signed on a timely basis and then back to us. So with all of those, we should be clear to close. So this is just in a nutshell from all my experiences, years of doing this, from a title perspective, how you guys as a realtor can help us, but it also helps you because it's not put into a rush mode with information. We can get all of this, work it out prior, because we want to make you guys look good too. So, and as I said, it is a partnership with all this working together.
So how often do you find that buyers and sellers are closing together, or do you find that they're doing it separately?
Well, since the new CD came out, I'm finding it's more common to have them signed separately.
Mm-hmm. And then do you find the seller sign first, the buyer signing first? Does it just depend on?
We try to get the seller to sign first, so when it's a loan, a lender, because the last piece is the loan, and then you can fund after that if you have the seller to sign.
Right.
But if the buyer signs, then you have to wait for the seller. So we try to get the seller to sign first, and then the buyer to sign second.